Hey, this is Janet from Put All Together. So this afternoon I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the differences between tinking, frogging, and all-out, no-holds-bars, righteous ripping. Alright, so tinking is when you just knit backwards. Tink is the word knit backwards. So it's just simply taking out one little stitch at a time until you get back to where you messed up. So maybe that's 5 or 6 stitches. Maybe it's one round of a sock. It's less than you just want to remove your whole needles and start pulling the yarn. So tinking is, kind of fixing minor-ish mistakes, unless you're okay with tinking for great distances. Tinking is by far the safest method of the 3 that we'll discuss today because you maintain control of all of your work, and you're not gonna drop, well, you might drop one stitch, but you're not gonna have multiple stitches without needles that you have to pick up. So I'll show you tinking in a moment. We'll go through each one. Frogging is a common, kind of a hokey term that a lot of knitters use because it comes from when you have yarn, or when you have a piece like this and you just start pulling the yarn, you start ripping it out. So ripping is ribbit, get it? Frogging. Okay, I know that's hokey, but it is what it is. So that's when you might have to rip out, maybe you're gonna take out this whole thing and start over. So you're just gonna remove all the needles and start pulling, okay? Frogging is a little more serious because after you pull out all those needles, you've got a bunch of loose loops, and you'll start pulling out the yarn however many times around or back and forth if it's a flat piece, and then you have to pick up all those little loops with your needle to begin knitting again. Maybe you get twisted stitches, maybe you miss one. It's a little riskier. So then righteous ripping is when you have an epic mistake and it's way back there and you really don't have a choice but to just pull it all and start again. And that's hard. It's hard to make the decision to do that. But on the other hand, there are times when it's just necessary. When you cannot, you just can't live with whatever is wrong. I do have an example of that as well. My husband saw that. He can't abide any of it. It kills him to watch me tear stuff out. But I've done it so much that it's okay. All right, so stay tuned for examples of all of that. Unfortunately, I have made plenty of mistakes, and I have examples of all 3 of these things: tinking, frogging, and yes, the epic righteous ripping. Alright, the example of tinking, which is simply, tink is the word knit backwards, like I mentioned earlier, and let's say I've got a mistake back here, and it's, relatively close, but I just want to take out a few stitches. I'm not going to pull out the needles or anything crazy like that. So this is a purl stitch, and if I lift up, you can see the loop below. So I'm just going to insert my needle into that, put it back on the left side, and pull that out. Okay, so this is tinking. Super simple. And on a knit stitch, you would just put your needle in down below, pick up the previous stitch, and pull that one out. So this is a good way to go back if you're only doing a few, and you just need to get back to where your mistake is. Now, I have known people that will tink rounds and rounds and rounds and go around and tink, just take the time to do it individually because they are super afraid of dropping a stitch and not being able to pick it back up. Well, let's say I have a mistake way on down here, and I'm not going to tink around 20 rows because that's going to take forever. In that case, I'm going to have to pull my needles out. And I know that looks super scary. But once you understand the construction of your knitting, it's less scary. And then I'm going to do some frogging. Rip it, ribbit, ribbit, frog. Okay, so see here. So if you do it carefully, you can see each loop and you can feel it kind of unsnap. Okay, so if I would just start pulling that out and doing that. Now if I wanted to pick that up, let's say I get back to where, well, there's either a slipped, I think that's probably a split stitch. So I would have to decide if I want to live with that or I just want to frog all the way back down to that particular row. Okay, so in any case, I'm going to need to pick back up all of these loops. Now see, I've already ripped back to where that was. Okay. There. Now, if I want to pick back up to where all these loops, I like to start at the beginning of my round. And I know that I usually start at the beginning of my rounds with a knit. So this was the first stitch of my round. I don't worry too much, honestly, I don't worry too much about which way I'm picking it up, whether I'm picking it up this way or whether I'm putting it in from the back. In from the back is actually going to position the stitch properly on the needle. But you know what? I just do it. I just get them all on there. And then I fix the twisted ones the first time I knit around. And I go ahead and pick them all up. And I just get them on there as best I can. And I don't worry about which way they're twisted or not or whatever. I just want to get them all on there so that I don't lose them. So in my case, I'm going to have several double pointed needles, and you can count. If you remember how many stitches you had on this, you can count, or you can simply just start sticking them on there and sort the other part out later, which is usually what I do. I just get it all picked up and then I sort out my count of how many stitches per needle. I sort that all out later. I don't worry too much about that immediately, because I just want to get all these suckers picked back up so I don't lose them and have them start unraveling. Like, you don't want to have it start doing that. Ah. Right? I can fix that, and I will, but that's what you want to avoid. So anyway, that's the idea. And then once I go back around, I will make sure that all of these are not twisted and facing the right direction. Okay, so that was tinking and frogging. So what follows next is a video that I shot last summer, and I've been kind of holding this in reserve. I didn't really want to show my beginners this video because it can be a little discouraging to put in a whole lot of work for something and then rip it all out. But you know, sometimes it's just necessary to be happy with the end results. And that's what I try to teach my kids as well as my beginner students is, you know, you're putting a ton of work into a handmade product. You want to have it right. You want to have it be a representation of something that you're proud of. And so, like on these socks, for example, I started out and I knitted the first, I don't know, I probably knitted the first several inches. And then, you know, I tried them on and it just wasn't right. And I ripped out, during that first night of knitting, I probably ripped out this much because I just, you know, I could have carried on and I could have knitted the socks for someone else and given them to someone else. But you know what? I wanted them. I'm knitting this pair for me, and I wanted them to be right. And so I went ahead and, you know, I carried on and I tore all that out and I started over and well, I didn't start all the way over. I knitted back to where I was finished with the toe part. But you know, it was several inches. So it's worth doing properly. It's worth doing right. And if you have a mistake that's teeny tiny and nobody's ever going to see it and you won't even find it, leave it. But what follows is a video where I had a significant mistake and I could not deal. It was something I could not get over, and had I finished, well, I did finish the project. Had I left it, it would have bothered me forever. So check it out. While I really love this pattern, I have discovered some mistakes that I cannot live with. And I'm just enough of a type A OCD personality that I can't. I mean, it's a mistake that you can't unsee once you realize it. So what you'll notice is there on the left, there's three, that's my mom's hand. She's helping me so I don't shake the camera too much by pointing. There are three lines that originate there, and they go over the lines that go the other direction. So on the other side, now you can see where I've messed up, and I did the over and under instead of overs only. Right. Well, I can't deal with that. And while that's unfortunate, and I love this pattern, like I said, truthfully, it's not my color, and I made this for a different purpose. I actually made it for a fundraising auction, but then I did not complete it in time, even after staying up several nights in a row till 3 and 4 in the morning. So the lesson here is that rushing does not help, does not pay, is not worth it. So be diligent and careful in your knitting. This is my mom. Say hi, Carol. She's in our group as well, and she's going to help me tear all this out. It's about 650 yards or so. So we're debating now whether to put it on the Swift. And then, you know, yarn is kind of kinky when you tear it out. So I could re-steam it and then re-skein it. Or we have a ball winder here. And we could just, you know, we could clamp it on the table and just wind it in a ball. And if we did it loosely, Nana, do you think it would relax enough if we did that?
Eventually.
Eventually it would probably relax. So I will repurpose this yarn because I know myself well enough to know that I can't unsee that mistake, and I won't be happy with it. So let that be a lesson. You can learn from my mistakes, right? Right. All right, let the frogging commence. Go ahead, start ripping. We'll video the ripping a little bit here. So, yes. There we go.
Righteous ripping.
Righteous ripping, yes. Carol says righteous ripping. Isn't that the truth? Now, if my husband were home, he'd just about be in tears, and he'd be like, you can just deal with that. So that was my lesson, too, is do I let this be a lesson in acceptance of imperfection? But you know what? I'm just not that personally evolved yet. I can't do it. So, okay, we're ripping. We're still ripping. I've been winding. You can see the yarn is wound here. I'm winding. There you go. And Carol is frogging or ripping. So probably in about another 10 or 15 minutes it will be done, as if it never existed. And then it won't vex me anymore that I made that tired mistake. And here we have the last. And the moral of the story is don't knit when you're super tired, and be willing to correct your mistakes.